Okay, the first time I've created and narrated a story that came to me in my dreams. So let's give it a shot and see how it goes. Well, here goes nothing. The Second Sunrise, a story of second chances. Every haveli keeps three secrets, one in its walls, one in its people, and one in the heart of the person who refuses to leave. I once met an old storyteller in Rajasthan who told me that every haveli is alive. Not alive the way you and I are alive, but alive with memory. He said the walls remember every laugh that echoed through their courtyards. The stone remembers every pair of footsteps that crossed it. And the doors remember every person who left and every soul who stayed behind. And then he smiled. The strange thing, though, he said, is that the haveli always knows which of these two was braver. This is one such story. On the western edge of an old Rajasthani town stood a magnificent haveli. Its walls were carved from honey-colored sandstone that seemed to catch fire every evening when the setting sun kissed them. Its balconies curved outward like watchful eyes. Its windows wore delicate stone lattice work through which generations of women had watched weddings, festivals, sandstorms, and funerals. Within its very walls lived nearly 40 people. The owners occupied the grand suites overlooking the central courtyard. Below them lived uncles, aunties, cousins, grandparents, and a whole assortment of relatives. And beyond them bustled cooks, gardeners, stable hands, cleaners, accountants, and old retainers who had all but forgotten that there was ever another life outside these gates. This haveli never truly slept. Even before dawn, someone was grinding spices. Someone else was drawing water. A cook was already kneading dough. A grandmother hurriedly whispered morning prayers. Pigeons gathered on the rooftops as faithfully as the sunrise. And before any of these people awoke, one man had already long begun his day. His name was Nirvaan. For almost 8 years, he had been the caretaker of the haveli. Every morning, long before the first rays of sunlight touched the sandstone walls, he unlocked the enormous teak gates. The hinges creaked with a sound so familiar that even the pigeons seemed to recognize it. He swept the front courtyard until every grain of desert sand surrendered. He watered the jasmine climbing ancient pillars. He polished brass lamps that no one remembered to light anymore. He repaired broken steps before anyone noticed that they had cracked. He knew every loose tile, every stubborn lock. He even knew every pigeon that preferred one rooftop over another. He knew which neem tree would flower first when the summer winds arrived. People often said that if this haveli had a heartbeat, it was Nirvaan. He lived in a small outhouse beyond the old stables. It held a little more than a charpai, a wooden cupboard, a shelf of books, and a brass kettle blackened by years of brewing cardamom tea. To anyone else, it looked lonely. To Nirvaan, it had just become enough. Because some hearts learned to stop asking for more. Yet it had always not been so. Years ago, before silence became his closest companion, there had been someone. Her name was Meher, or to be precise, Rajkumari Meher. She was the mistress of the haveli, elegant and confident, and beautiful enough that strangers lowered their voices when she entered a room. She possessed that rare gift of making everyone believe that they had her complete attention, and this included Nirvaan. It all began rather innocently. A forgotten book returned to the library, a conversation while supervising repairs after the monsoon, an evening spent rescuing peacocks that had wandered too close to the rose garden. Little moments, tiny moments, the sort that become memories before one realizes they are becoming love. And against all reason, they fell for each other. She spoke to him not as a servant, but as a man. And for a while, a brief while, he believed that was enough. Perhaps it even was. Well, that was until it wasn't. Meher was a woman accustomed to changing seasons. She admired beauty wherever she found it. Artists fascinated her, travelers intrigued her, poets enchanted her. When one story ended, another quietly began. More than a year ago now, hers with Nirvaan ended too. There was no dramatic farewell, no cruel argument, no betrayal, just absence. She stopped waiting for him in the gardens, stopped asking whether the jasmine had flowered, stopped noticing him altogether. Soon there were new faces visiting the haveli, a musician from Jaipur, a businessman from Delhi, and a photographer from Mumbai. Lovers? Perhaps. Perhaps only admirers. Nirvaan had never dared ask. He had no right to ask. He simply bowed his head down and continued polishing brass lamps, sweeping courtyards and feeding the pigeons. Some wounds do not bleed. They simply become part of the landscape. One afternoon, while returning from the market, carrying lamp oil and jaggery, Nirvaan noticed an old man seated beneath a sprawling banyan tree. The old traveler looked exhausted. His clothes were faded by the sun and his face leathery. His sandals had surrendered to the countless roads that they had trod upon. Without thinking, Nirvaan poured water from his brass lota into a small metal cup and handed it to him. The old man drank slowly, and then he smiled. Not politely, but knowingly, as though, Nirvaan would later reminisce, he recognized me before I recognized him. You carry an old sorrow, the traveler said. Nirvaan managed a weak attempt of a smile. Don't we all? The old man chuckled. No. Most people carry yesterday. You carry tomorrow. Nirvaan bit his lips and frowned, trying to think of what it meant. And he finally said, I don't understand. The traveler stood. His knees complained louder than he did. He quickly adjusted the frayed cloth around his shoulders. Then, without another explanation, he said, Everyone is given another chance. He took 3 steps, and then he stopped. Without turning around, he added, The tragedy isn't that we lose it. It is that we fail to recognize it. And then he disappeared into the crowded bazaar. Nirvaan watched him until the colors of the market swallowed him completely. Strange fellow, he thought to himself. He never imagined that he would see him again. The old bazaar was alive in a way only Indian bazaars can be. Spices perfumed the air, loud noises, and a mix of aromas, turmeric, cardamom, roasted cumin, and fresh coriander, all intermingling. Children chased each other between stalls, selling bangles and embroidered fabrics. Camel bells chimed lazily, and vendors called out impossible discounts. Someone argued over the price of mangoes. Someone else insisted the jalebis were the finest in all of Rajasthan. Nirvaan loved the market because no one expected him to be anything there except another face in the crowd. Invisible. Until someone crashed directly into him. Bang! He had the wind knocked out of him and fell down. The bag slipped away from his hands. Jaggery rolled one way, lemons rolled another. A small packet of saffron burst open like golden dust. Oh, brilliant, came a cheerful voice. Now the vegetables have escaped. Nirvaan blinked. Before him knelt a young woman trying to catch runaway lemons while simultaneously apologizing to a tomato seller who wasn't remotely involved. She wore a simple marigold colored odani. Silver bangles jingled every time she moved. A loose curl escaped her braid every few seconds, only for her to impatiently tuck it behind her ear. She looked up. Oh, you're smiling. Nirvaan instinctively touched his face. I am? Barely, she said. But it's progress. Without waiting for permission, she handed him 2 rescued lemons. Hi, I'm Ahaana. Nirvaan, he said slowly. She nodded thoughtfully. You look like someone who drinks tea without sugar. I do, he said. I knew it. Then he asked her, how? You have tragic eyebrows. He stared at her. She burst out into laughter. Oh, don't look so confused. I make up things all the time. Before he realized what had happened, he was sitting beside her at a tiny roadside stall, eating piping hot kachoris. I should be getting back, he said. Well, she replied, so should I. But neither moved. She dipped another piece into tamarind chutney. Tell me something. He thought and replied, what? When was the last time you did something completely pointless? He thought a bit and said, well, the other day I repaired a broken well pulley. She quickly chimed, hey, but that's useful. He thought a bit more. I catalogued every bird nesting around the pond. She replied even before he could complete. Also useful. He started and she sighed dramatically. Oh, you've forgotten how to waste time. He thought some more and replied, I don't think I never knew. Well, she said, and stood up. Then congratulations. I'm going to teach you. Before he could object, she paid for both their plates despite his protests. Next time, she said, it's your turn, jabbing her finger at him. There won't be a next time, he said. She grinned at him and said, there always is. And then she disappeared into the crowd. Nirvaan stood there for a long moment, and for reasons he couldn't explain, the market suddenly seemed brighter than it had that morning. He walked back to the haveli carrying 1 less packet of jaggery, 1 less packet of saffron, and one unfamiliar feeling, something he hadn't sensed in a while. Hope. Very small, very quiet, but unmistakably alive. Hope. That evening, as he locked the great gates beneath a sky streaked with crimson and gold, he caught himself smiling weakly. Not because life had changed. It hadn't. The courtyards were the same, the jasmine smelled the same. The silence waiting in his little outhouse was the same. Yet something was different. For the first time in over a year, he found himself wondering what tomorrow might bring. And somewhere beyond the city walls, beneath the fading light of the desert sky, an old wandering ascetic smiled to himself as though he had been expecting that very thought from Nirvaan. That is the end of part 1. Well, thank you.